Hello guys, how are you? Okay, so as in my previous video, I had talked about Fortigate High Availability, but that Fortigate High Availability video was just on setting up a HA cluster, configuration of the HA. So today we will be doing with a deep dive into the HA, understanding how HA works and how you can troubleshoot. So our today's topic will be basically deep dive Fortigate HA. It's not only HA but deep dive Fortigate HA. So before continuing, how the HA works. In HA, what exactly happens is, in Fortigate we got two devices, and let me draw a diagram. So what happens in Fortigate, we got two Fortigate firewalls, let's say, and this is a switch, and we can say both the switch is connected to both the firewalls, and they are connected via both the Fortigate firewalls will be connected via HA cable. So once they are connected via HA, so let's say HA interface, HA, this is HA, then this will be, let's say, the inside interface, this will be inside interface, let me make it smaller, this will be inside interface, and we have got similar setup because it needs to be same, and we have, let's say, some shapes I will take, and I will draw one more diagram. Just will connect one outside as well, outside HA, and a switch there as well, let's say, and okay, so I will say this is outside switch. Okay, so when we configure a Fortigate HA, what happens? These two Fortigates are assigning a virtual MAC to their all the interfaces except for the heartbeat interface, HA interface. So all interfaces are assigned. All interfaces are assigned a virtual MAC address except for the HA interface. This is the first thing. Then you know how a switch forwards the traffic. Switch basically forwards the traffic by creating a ARP table. So on the switch there is a ARP table, and in the ARP table we will have the virtual IP or the Fortigate IP, let's say 192.168.1.1, and this will be pointing to the virtual MAC. This will be pointing to the virtual MAC, and wherever the virtual MAC will reside, that will be the active firewall. Let's say this is the active firewall. So in this case, the virtual MAC will be on the active firewall. So virtual MAC will be on the active firewall. But if there is a failover, let's say a failover happened, what will happen? Firewall will send a GARP request to the switch to modify the ARP entry, and in the ARP entry, the only thing will be, let's say currently it's pointing to 1/0 interface, then it will start pointing to 1/1. So the switch will update the ARP address, update the ARP table with the interface number pointing for that MAC address. Let's say this is 1/0 interface on the switch, but once there is a failover, it will simply update the MAC address to 1/1. So this is how the failover happens, or how the traffic is forwarded, just by using a one IP address and by pointing that IP address to the virtual MAC address. So let's go back here to our PPT, and I will tell you the same thing. So virtual MAC address. Primary firewalls, each interface is assigned with a virtual MAC address. And after failover, the new primary firewall overtakes the same virtual MAC address as the former. This is what I have explained. So this is a case. So I have firewall 01, 02. This is before a failover. This condition is before a failover. So what will happen is, as already explained, like all the interfaces will be having a physical MAC address, and virtual MAC address will always be on the active firewall. So the switch will point the virtual MAC address for that particular IP on the firewall 01. And let's say a failover occurred, the virtual MAC address will move from firewall 01 to firewall 0 interface, 02 interface, and the switch will update the ARP entry where the Fortigate will be sending a GARP request. Now, how we see, like, how the virtual MAC address is calculated. Okay, before the calculation, let us see how we can verify, like, what is the physical and virtual MAC address. Let's say if you do diag hardware device info NIC port 1. So if you run this command, diag hardware device info NIC port 1, you will be able to see the hardware address and permanent hardware address. So permanent hardware address is basically, this is the permanent MAC and this is the virtual MAC. So hardware address is the current virtual MAC and permanent hardware is the actual physical MAC. All the virtual MAC addresses in a Fortigate firewall will always start from 0009 and 0F, and rest 3 digits or 3 hexadecimals are represented by the group ID, cluster ID, and the interface index. So how we can see, how we can verify the physical MAC and the virtual MAC address is by using diag hardware device info NIC and then the port 1. If you want to verify port 1 or port 2 may be outside interface, inside interface, depending on the configuration. As I am already running the diag hardware, let me tell you some other usage of device hardware device info as well. Here, using this command, you will be able to see the MTU of the interface, what is the current duplex or the speed settings, where speed is 1000 full and auto negotiate is disabled. We can see, like, what is the RX and TX. We can see here the RX, we can see the TX here, and if in case any CRC errors, everything, those also will be seen using this command. So generally, whenever we are doing a troubleshooting for a Fortigate firewall, we are like not aware of this command. So diag hardware is the command using which you can see the current MAC address, permanent MAC address, any error interfaces, CRC, the speed duplex, the current status of the interface, whether it's a up or down, all this can be seen using this command. And of course, the GUI shows it, but using the CLI. So as I told you, like, when you are in a firewall HA group, so your firewall will be assigning an virtual MAC and a physical MAC. So physical MAC address is the permanent MAC address and hardware address or the current virtual MAC address is which points to. If you check the same thing on the second firewall, let's say okay, so let's check the same thing on the second firewall. If I do diag hardware device info NIC port 1. So if I do device NIC info port 1 here, you will see the permanent MAC address and the current hardware address both are same. But on the active firewall, you will see the hardware address is the virtual MAC and permanent is the actual physical MAC. On the second firewall, both current and virtual is the physical. So basically the current virtual MAC is pointing to the firewall 01. So this is how you can know like which firewall is currently having the virtual MAC, and so it's always like whichever firewall is the active firewall, that will have the virtual MAC address, and that is updated to the neighboring device or to a switch by using a GARP request from the Fortigate if it is a failover from the Fortinet side or something wrong from the Fortinet side. But if it is a request from switch side, then it will be a normal ARP request by the switch, ARP broadcast, and it can discover the virtual MAC address for that particular IP address. Now let me show you the same thing in our PPT. I'm going to explain. So this is what we had discussed. Now coming to the virtual MAC address, how the virtual MAC address is calculated. So for any firewall, any Fortigate firewall, virtual MAC address will always start with 0009 and 0F. Then then it will take the HA group ID. Let's say while doing the configuration, if you see the configuration here, config system HA. 1 minute, my screen is not recording fully. So let's say if you go to let me start from the beginning. If you go to config system HA and if you do a show, you will see the group ID. Group ID 5, and let's do a diag hardware device info NIC port 1. What is the group ID? 5. And if I go to the hardware address current virtual 05, so 05 is the group ID. But this will only go up to 9, because if you check in the hexadecimal, that will be up to 9. So the MAC address is calculated based on 00090F09 and the group ID, and then the interface ID, interface index. So for interface port number 1, the index is 0, port 2, the index is 1. So because the index starts from 0. So that is why the MAC address is 0500. So whenever you have multiple Fortigate clusters in the same L2 broadcast network or in the same L2 network, there are chances of virtual MAC address clash between the firewall if you have the same group ID configured on both the firewall clusters. So it's always recommended to have different group IDs on two different Fortigate clusters in a same broadcast network. So you can see the MAC address calculation is 0009 0F09, and then it will be always HA group ID, then the cluster ID or the interface ID. So from the MAC address we can easily determine that whether it's a virtual MAC address that belongs to Fortigate. As soon as you see in the troubleshooting like 0009, so that means it's a Fortigate virtual MAC. Here as I shown in the lab device, it's the same. If you do get hardware NIC port 2, you will be able to see the MAC address. So this is the interface index for port 2.1, 05 is the group ID, and this is the MAC address. And as told that if you have 2 or more Fortigate clusters in the same broadcast domain and with the same group ID, then there are chances of MAC address clash. Recently I had a issue with one of my branch locations. So basically we had a L2 network from a service provider, and I had multiple branches connected to the same L2 link. So when we were facing like traffic disruptions on the site, and the behavior was very abnormal. Like sometimes the application or the traffic was working, whereas sometimes there was an issue with the application. We were troubleshooting this issue for many days because let's say the issue was at the site A and site B, and they were totally two different sites, two different locations, so we were not able to correlate between them. And we tried to figure out like what is causing. We took packet captures on the firewall, everything, but we could not determine the cause. Then we raised a like ticket with the service provider, Then we raised a ticket with the service provider, the ISP, and because ISP has a visibility on the links from both the sides, so ISP told like he is receiving the same MAC address from two different locations. When he told like how we can receive, when he told this, I was a little bit surprised, and he told that we were thinking like how we can see two MAC address from two different sites. That's something not possible. Then we checked with Fortigate, and yeah, then we came to this, yeah, because if the two Fortigate clusters are in the same broadcast network and are using the same group ID, then there are chances of MAC address clash between the clusters. So if you have two Fortigate clusters, it always recommended to change the group ID on both of these clusters. By default, the group ID is always 0 on a Fortigate cluster, and you can modify it. At the same time, I also came to know one thing while troubleshooting that thing, like any configuration between the HA, generally HA configuration is not sync, because HA configuration we configure it manually, and once the HA configuration is done, then the rest of the configuration is synced. But if you change the group ID, during a live traffic, or if you found during some troubleshooting like you need to change the group ID, so yes, the group ID can be changed even during the live troubleshooting. There will not be any issue. So you just simply say set. See, I will show you the difference between both the firewalls. Let's say HA, I will do a show group ID here also to show you config system HA show. So right now we can see the group ID is 5. Let's go to the firewall 1, and I will say set group ID, let's say 4, and I will do end. Now if you see, I changed the group ID to 4. Now if you do a diag hardware device NIC port 1, you will see, look, the MAC address has been changed. So because earlier the group ID was earlier the group ID was 5, so it was MAC address was 0905, but now I have changed the group ID to 4, so now the MAC address has been changed to 4. At the same time, if you go to the second firewall and do again a show here, you will be able to see why it's not synced. Yeah, so if you go onto the other firewall and you do a show, you will be able to see the group ID replicated, the configuration is synced. So how I came to know about the group ID changes, because when I was doing the troubleshooting for my two sites, there was live traffic and I was not sure whether group ID change will be synchronized between both the firewalls. Then I did a test on my left firewall and I figured out like, yeah, I can do that. So just for everyone's information, group ID change can be done during any live traffic, but any other parameters will have an impact on your HA cluster. So group ID can be changed. So if you want to change a group ID, you can change it anytime, and it will be auto replicated or synced to the configuration of the secondary slave master. And just to confirm, like even how the group ID has an impact on the MAC address calculation, so you can see, so based on the group ID, the MAC address has been changed. So this way you can avoid the MAC address clash if both the firewalls are running the same, running in the same L2 network. So now we know how the virtual MAC address is assigned, how the virtual MAC address moves from one firewall to other firewall, and how it is calculated, what are the different values that it has. It has got the interface index, the group ID, and the initially assigned numbers. And same way, if you at the same time, if you check on firewall 01, okay, this is as I have shown you on the left. This is like if you check on the firewall 01, you will be able to see the MAC address, virtual MAC address here. And if you check on the secondary firewall, you see the physical MAC address and the virtual MAC address are the same, or the current MAC address are the same. So here it shows like no virtual MAC address is assigned, no virtual MAC assigned, as it's the secondary firewall. And if you are checking it on the active firewall, you can see this is a permanent MAC, permanent hardware address, and virtual MAC address is assigned. So similarly, you will see that all interfaces on the primary will have a virtual MAC address, and slave or the secondary firewall will not have any virtual MAC address assigned. There is an exception to the virtual MAC address assignment, that is, virtual MAC addresses are not assigned to heartbeat interfaces. Because heartbeat interfaces are directly connected or by switch, but they are assigned an IP address from a series 169.254 and based on the serial number of the device. So the virtual MACs are only assigned to the traffic interface or data interface, not to the heartbeat interface. So other way, if we now for like checking the state of different HA values or HA configuration, you can use the diag HA status, where like this parameter activity HA ID changes. It tells like how many times the HA heartbeat has been received. So these things tells about that. And if you see here, you will be able to see like what is the priority configured for the different devices. And this tells the state of the clusters, like what is the current state of the cluster. So cluster state is like whether it's a working and its cluster is up and running or not. Same way. Okay, now see the other advantage of having a Fortigate cluster is, or Fortigate High Availability is, like all the connections table or the connection table is synchronized between the firewalls, so that in case of any issues with the primary firewall, all sessions or connections are automatically handled by the secondary firewall, because it already had all the information related to the sessions in the table. So if you do a diag session list on the firewall, if let's go back to the firewall, let's do a diag session list. So you will be able to see like all the session table here. So here you see a value called synced and the HA ID. See, you see here HA ID. So HA ID is basically, it tells that which firewall is handling this particular connection, and of course the ID here will be always from the master firewall. So if you see let's say if I do a diag HA status, you see here like the index and serial number 1 and 0. So from this you will come to know the like which firewall is 0 and the 1, and let's say this is the serial number. Sorry, I was running diag HA, but you need to run get HA status, and you can see the operating index, like what is the index of this firewall. So primary is index 0 and the other firewall is index 1. So if you do a diag session list, like to see the connections table, you will see HA ID equal to 0, means this connection is handled by the firewall index 0, which is the primary firewall. Same way, you will also see a parameter called synced. Synced basically tells whether this connection is synchronized or not. Let's say we'll grab why sync is not there, because these connections are local, all locally managed connections. I don't have a traffic passing through this firewall currently. So local traffic or the traffic originated from the firewall or the management traffic is not synchronized. So I am not seeing the connections because I don't have a live traffic on this firewall now. So I am not able to see any other sessions which are synced. But you can see the HA ID here, which tells which firewall is handling this. And you will see apart from this state, you will see a synced if the connection is synced. I will show you how. Wait, okay, here you can see. So this tells the firewall that is handling the connection. Okay, so now as we have understood how to check different HA parameters, how virtual MAC address is assigned, calculated. Yeah, I forgot to tell one more. Okay, it's there. we can, there is one more command which is always useful in the troubleshooting, that is diag HA history read. Diag HA history read. So what happens, like let's say there was a failover in the night at your data center or at your firewalls. There was a failover in the night, but you didn't notice because all traffic was passing through smoothly. Next day you realized, or in the morning you figured out based on some incident that, oh, there was a firewall failover yesterday at the night, and you want to see what was the cause behind this. So if you run the command diag HA history read, you will be able to see the historical events related to HA failover. So let's say it says HA talk started, who was the new member, what time. So it was all on 7th of July, and now we have it on 17th of July again. So if you want to see, let's say if I do a failover now, then also we will be seeing a one more event here. So keep in mind that says HA history read helps us to know any historical events related to the HA, related to the HA. Okay. Now there is the other thing is, if you want to do a manual failover, how to do a manual failover, how you can do a manual failover, because we generally don't see a option in the GUI or in the CLI to make this firewall as active. So basically in Fortigate what happens, Fortigate does the calculation based on the uptime of the device, serial number of the device. So if you reset the uptime of a device to a 0, that means it will think the other device is having a higher uptime, and it will make that as the master. I will be showing that you in the lab. But before that, let's go. Like, what are the situations when a failover is triggered? So you had two firewalls. In which situations you will have a failover triggered from firewall 1 to the firewall 2? What are the different situations when there will be a failover triggered? So the first situation is when a monitored interface goes down. So if you have like multiple interfaces inside, outside, DMG, and so many, and you have those interfaces in monitored interface. You have configured those interfaces as monitored interface. So if any of the monitored interface goes down, that will trigger a failover between the firewall devices. The second possible scenario is whenever OS or the FortiOS detects a failure with the SSD, like any of the hard disks on the device. But this particular option is only available on the models which has got or which have a SSD. Or which has a SSD configured. So if not configured, SSD available. So if SSD is available, then a failover will be triggered. The third condition is like whenever the primary device stops responding or stops sending the heartbeat heartbeats. So let's say you have firewall 01, 02, firewall 01 is the primary, but on the heartbeat interface, firewall 01 is not sending any heartbeat to the secondary device. So in that case also a failover will trigger and firewall 02 will become the primary device. And the third and the last option is whenever there is a ICMP reply is timed out, or if you have configured any ping monitor, like what you can do, let's say you can ping a IP address, let's say google.com or 4.2.2 or any IP address throughout your network which is reachable from the firewall, and you can configure a ping or a ICMP for that particular IP address, and if that IP address goes down or if the ICMP is timed out, in that case also a device failover can happen. But that depends on the configuration. If you have configured a ping monitor or link monitor is configured. So these are the 4 different conditions during which a failover triggers. So what are these? You can see when a monitored interface goes down, when a ICMP reply is timed out, if you have configured a link monitor, or if the primary device stops responding to the heartbeat keep alive, or if OS detects a failure with SSD drives. But SSD drive is only on particular available models where you have SSD drives configured. And how you can configure a link monitor, as I told, like you can set a IP address to monitor. So this is how you can configure. You can do a config system link monitor, give some name to the link monitor, set the source interface, and you can, so basically what it does, if this server becomes unreachable, it will reduce the HA priority of this device, so that will trigger a failover to the other device. And this is taken from a Fortigate public KB article itself, so I am just referencing that but KB article as well here. So if you want to see how to configure the link monitor, what we can do, we can go to our firewall, we can say config system link monitor, config system link monitor, and give some name, edit my IP ping monitor, let's say my IP ping monitor, and set source interface. What will be the source interface? In my case, let's say I will put internet, I will put internet A, or I can say port 2, sorry, port 2 is my source interface, and set server. I need to set the server. What will be the server? Let's say I am pinging 4.2.2, and set HA priority. What, how much value I want to reduce? Let's say I will set the priority to 10 and end. So this is how config system link monitor, and you can do it. So you can see like a ping monitor or a link monitor has been configured. Now if you see, let us go to this article just to explain you more onto the link monitor. So once this is the link monitor is configured, you need to go to the HA configuration. What you need to do, you need to go to the HA configuration, but before that we can check whether my link monitor is up before binding it to the HA. Otherwise my HA device will fail over. Diagnose sys link monitor status. So you can see I had configured for a peer IP 1.4.2.2 and packet sent and packet received. That means my ping monitor is working successfully and is able to reach to the internet. So if I bind this to config system HA and set, and we have to set this link monitor, we have to bind this link monitor to the HA configuration. Okay, we have to bind this to HA configuration. How you can do this? 1 minute. Yeah, so what we need to do is we need to go to config system HA and we have to say set ping server monitor interface. And why it's only showing port 2? Because we have a ping monitor configured or the link monitor configured only on the port 2. So if I say port 2 end, so now this ping monitor has been binded with the HA configuration. So if in case the IP address 4.2.2 becomes unreachable from this Fortigate firewall, that will trigger a failover to the other device. So if you see diagnosis link monitor status, you can see it's continuously reachable. Fail times is 0/5. That means it has never failed. So if you do get sys HA status, you can see, or you can do a diag sys HA status. You can see the cluster is proper and there is no failover. Diag sys HA history read. You can see it's like nothing, no failover. Now let us do what I can do. I can make 4.2.2 unreachable, or I can shut down the interface. Then of course shutting down the interface will fail over. So this is like it's clear now. Like if you configure the ping server, then also you can make the device failover. So now let's go to our next. Okay, this I already explained to you. HA history read I already explained. Link monitor I explained. Okay, so just to revise again, we explained about how the virtual MAC addresses are assigned to the Fortigate, how the traffic flows to the current active firewall, how the virtual MAC address moves between the device once there is a failover. Then we told like how the MAC address is recalculated. The MAC address is always starts with 00090F09 and then the HA group ID and then the vCluster ID or the interface ID. How we can verify the virtual MAC addresses from the interface by using get hardware NIC port to NIC and then the port number. We can also see like virtual MAC address is always assigned on to the current active firewall, whereas it is not assigned on to the slave or the secondary firewall. Using the command diag sys HA status, we can check the status of the high availability group. We can see the priority of the firewalls. We can see what is the current cluster state of the firewall. And then if you want to see in the session list like which device or which HID index is handling this connection, that can also be seen from the diag sys session list. And we can also see whether this connection is synchronized or not synchronized between the firewalls. Then we told you about the different situations when a failover can happen, and it is like basically 4 conditions: when the interface, when a monitored interface goes down, when a ICMP reply or ping monitor goes down, but this option is not by default. You have to configure a link monitor for that. The third is when the primary device stops responding or sending to the heartbeats, keep alive. And the last one is device specific or model specific. If the device is having an SSD drive, then SSD is also taken into care, SSD failure. Then I explained you how you can configure a link monitor and how you can bind it. You can also visit this Fortinet KB article for more explanation. Then I also told you about diag sys HA history read, which tells any historical events related to the HA. So hope guys this HA, explanation on different commands and how you can check and troubleshoot HA issues, this was helpful for you, or this will be helpful for you in any future troubleshooting. If you have any questions related to Fortigate, related to high availability or anything, even if you have any questions related to a production environment or you are facing any issues, all your questions are welcome in the comments. I will be happy to help you on those things. Thank you guys, thank you so much. If you like this video, you can subscribe to our channel for such updates, and I will be keep posting my videos for further information. Thank you everyone, thank you so much. Bye bye.